Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Measurement Talks. Brian, right before we started recording, you were telling me about this article that you saw for the meta exports for MMM data. And honestly, I don't know anything about it. So I was hoping we could just start there. It sounds super interesting, especially because during the performance summit, they spent a lot of time talking about MMM. So my not knowing anything about it, my sense is they're on this trajectory of trying to continue to help people do MMM as signal continues to fade. But yeah, help us understand what's going on here.
Yeah, I think the general read I get out of it is Meta is looking to really enable the accessibility of its data to then help agencies or platforms or even brands themselves use metadata for MMM. The general update, by the way, it came from Igor Skokan. He is the marketing science director out of London at Meta, and he posted it in the Robin open source MMM Facebook group. It's a public Facebook group. I highly recommend if you're getting into like an MMM, highly recommend you get into that group. But he posted that today Meta started rolling out their marketing mix modeling data, which basically is allowing all business manager accounts to access simple exports from the reporting tab or the reporting window of their business manager. So they can go to ads reporting, head over to reports, export, and then you'll see media mix modeling. And it's got basically some pre-configured fields, and you're able to pull ad hoc reports that you can then use to feed into your model. So I think it's kind of like a almost done for you export rather than needing to like set up all the different columns and what is the right date range and filters and what's the right campaigns and all that stuff. So definitely speaks to the accessibility. The other update that came along with this news is that you can also automate the process using the Insight API. So Meta has an API now that is specific to marketing mix modeling. And I took a look and there's some interesting stuff in there. So you're able to obviously pull by campaign ID, campaign name, ad set name. What I thought was really, really encouraging, really interesting was creative media type. Creative media type is one of the columns, as well as publisher platform, platform position, device platform. And all of those speak to sort of the granularity, right? A lot of MMMs historically have been very much top down at the channel level. Oh, is Facebook performing better or worse than Google or this? And I think Meta, with just the innovation MMM, they're not trying to just get down to the campaign level or the strategy level, but really down to the creative and placements. And so it's kind of fascinating to see the accessibility of the data that they're providing. With AI and all the innovation that's happening there, I think it definitely opens up more opportunity for some of these models that would take a long time and finding the right model and the best fit to use AI to basically expedite that entire process and potentially have media mix modeling down at the creative level, which is kind of crazy to think about for me.
That's for sure the direction. That's what I was going to ask. If they're already starting to automate a bunch of these fields, something we talked about last week is you were mentioning that you were starting to hear that they were thinking about just like automatically basically doing incrementality for a bunch of accounts.
Yes.
And so like, as I hear what we talked about last week and what you're saying right now, it's hard not to like sort of draw a line and say like, they might just start giving you like estimates on incrementality on a campaign or on an ad set basis, just out of the box. I mean, like, it just wouldn't surprise me if that's sort of the direction that they're heading in. If they're trying to give you these data inputs in order to actually feed your MMM model and then like sort of prepare for no signal at all and help you understand like, hey, here's the impact of this campaign. Here's the impact of this other campaign. I think at the ad level feels tough, but at the campaign level, imagine that they would be able to do that. So
yeah. Could you just imagine like Meta in the background just always has a perpetual 10% holdout on your entire account, and it uses that to then provide always on incrementality testing? That would be absolutely incredible and revolutionary. It would scare some people.
Can I tell you something? We're going to do that. This pod is not about any one company, but we're literally going to do that for our company. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the URL that we push users to, and then we're going to give the brand a knob as to how much they want us to hold out, and the default will be 10%. And so you always know, like, hey, what is the incrementality of using this versus not? And it's just doing an arbitrary 10% holdout on a consistent basis. It does a secondary thing, which I think is like actually kind of interesting. It provides a failsafe in the case where the sort of like default path is not working, right? So I think like platforms like Facebook, I actually think like even email, SMS, like, we don't think about those as like advertising platforms, but they are, right? I think even they will start doing automated holdouts in order to prove incrementality.
That's pretty awesome. I feel brands that are, or companies, vendors and partners that are doing this sort of stuff it just makes decision making so much easier and cleaner. I think one hurdle here could be like, okay, everybody's doing their own holdouts and like their own incrementality testing, but in a way it's grading your own homework. And so I still think that brands will need to have their own to sort of calibrate the results. But once you've trusted the system and you've calibrated and you've confirmed that Meta's incrementality results are accurate, then like you don't need to continue paying for a model. You can, like, the whole point is to get that incrementality metric to then back into what you believe is the true ROI of that channel and how much you should invest into that channel. That's what media mix modeling attempts to do, right? Media mix modeling is more so trying to hone in on what that number is to then help you make a budgeting decision, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, that's an interesting world, right? I like it. I think as a brand, brands should absolutely encourage this. Like, we should definitely push, even if there's sort of like concern of, oh, they're grading their own homework. Like, it's better than what the system currently is right now. I mean, right now we're reliant on attribution, which is 100% grading its own homework. Like, go run a branded Google campaign and search campaign and tell me that the ROAS that you're getting is truly incremental to your business. Not to say it's not at all, but come on, like a 20x branded search campaign ROAS in Google isn't actually driving you a 20x return on your investment. But incrementality testing can help, provide a number that's a bit more closer to the actuality. Who I think is best positioned for something like this too is Shopify. And we were talking to, you brought up, they're working on a Shopify marketing tools, right? So like, this is interesting. This was not on my radar at all. And after this call, I'm going to dive deep into this with my retention manager. Give me the update there. Give us the sort of the tea leaves on what that says.
So there was actually two updates. One, like, I don't think is super relevant for this discussion. It was on the collab side. So they're actually making it possible for influencers to pick like items from any opted-in Shopify store in order to actually sell those items. So they're basically they're continuing to invest in their affiliate network. I mean, yeah, we don't need to spend a bunch of time there, but I think like that's like an incredibly bad idea. I think it's not going to work. It's not going to drive any results for any brands. It's going to be a total dud, but I understand why they're doing it. I think they need to show that they're like a creator company. And it's a way to drive the sort of higher value creators to create their own stores by just making these sort of like investments along the way. But the bigger announcement was marketing tools. And what they're doing is they're investing a ton into segmentation, email, and SMS, which is, I mean, like, I say those words and like everybody's thinking Klaviyo. It's like literally impossible to not think of Klaviyo. But the interesting thing that they're doing is that they've switched the pricing to usage based as opposed to based on the number of emails that you have. And this, I think, is like I think it's like a very, very interesting situation because the number one complaint people have with Klaviyo is that it gets expensive as your email list grows. And so by switching it to like usage based, there's already actually proof in the market that it cuts people's bills by actually quite a lot. So there's another company called SendLane that's gotten a little like sort of promoted on Twitter over the last 2 months. And they have usage-based pricing. And so a lot of people are switching over from Klaviyo to SendLane, but I don't know how differentiated different like email and SMS products are. I'm curious what your take is. Like, what do you guys use? Why did you make that decision? But I think that these investments are Shopify acknowledging that they just have to put a lot of work into helping brands with acquisition, like, either new customer acquisition or existing customer acquisition. And I think that from like a path point of view, I think that that's the most encouraging thing is like, okay, Shopify is going to make investments in acquisition. And that is actually like a very promising thing as a merchant to continue to like partner with Shopify as the provider for your e-com stack.
It is interesting. I mean, I took a look at the pricing as you were providing the overview, and sending 1 million emails, right, this month would cost $720. Right? And that's 1 million emails. So you probably do some back of the napkin math on your emails list size and like how many emails you send a month and like what is the total deliverability of those emails. And you could probably, back into what your total cost could be out of this and then compare that to what you're doing with Klaviyo. I imagine that this is going to be competitive. We use Klaviyo right now, and the decision making there is just kind of like, it's the platform that is the incumbent. It is the most integrated. It is the most seamless and easy to plug and play. What I really love about Klaviyo, and it's a underrated feature, I think, but they have audience syncs with Meta, where you can basically use Klaviyo as a customer data platform, right? Which I know you're very familiar with. And you can use Klaviyo to sort of be the core, like the center of all your segmentation and personalization. So as an example, you can take all your first time buyers and everybody that's only purchased one time. And of course you can send them an email, but at the same time, you can plug that audience into Facebook and have very specific messaging to get that first time buyer to buy a second time, right? And have creative that's specific to that customer. Hey, you're almost out of stock. Hey, you're almost running out. Hey, it's time to restock. Or, by the way, did you love your purchase? Would you consider making a second one? Here's another coupon for you. So I love leaning into Klaviyo for that sort of stuff as well, just because it has the impact outside of just email and SMS. What is interesting, what's caught my eye here as I started taking a look at the marketing tools sort of landing page from Shopify, shopify.com/marketing tools, marketing-tools. And segmentation is one of the big pillars that they're offering. They have email, forms, automations, and segmentation and inbox. And I wonder if segmentation is meant to sort of position Shopify as almost a customer data platform where you can create cohorts of audiences and then plug and play them into not just Meta, but across our marketing stack. I mean, Shopify is the best position to do that. It is the sort of the house of all the data. And I've always felt it was a miss on Shopify's end to not provide that level of support to be kind of a customer data platform, or for being that it is a CRM. What puzzles me about these news, though, as like I'm reading through this, August 2nd, right? Shopify made a strategic $100 million investment in Klaviyo.
Yeah.
So what's the play here? Is Shopify really just trying to de-risk the success of e-com brands?
100%. In fact, you want to know what's even funnier? Right after the marketing tools announcement, they announced a landing page to like publicly announce their venture arm. So it's like triple irony. Not only did they invest in Klaviyo, they then announced the Klaviyo competitor and then said, oh, by the way, we have a venture arm. It's like, man, I don't know what you're doing. Like, who's going to come to you for funding? But anyway, I think like Shopify's point of view, which I don't think is unreasonable, is what do we do about the mid tail and long tail of merchants who are like potentially worried about the Klaviyo price, like even the startup cost of Klaviyo, right? And Klaviyo, on the other hand, is like, I don't really need to serve the long and mid tail because like they're kind of platform agnostic at this point. You don't even have to be an e-com brand actually to use Klaviyo at this point, right? So I think Klaviyo is probably just like, sure, take like the upstarts and the SMB market. No problem. For example, I know that's Attentive's point of view on the SMS world. Like Attentive actually literally cannot afford to sign up a small customer, interestingly. Like they're negative on a gross margin basis on small customers. And so I think that these things are all about sort of Shopify's big problem right now is that they need it to be possible to continue to create more merchants. And I think that that's why they're making these investments. So that's my suspicion. We'll see. We'll see how it shakes out. I'm excited to meet a merchant who uses their tools, honestly. Because so far I only know people who use third parties. Like almost everybody I know uses Klaviyo or Attentive.
I might give it a shot. I mean, I just pulled up my fees on Klaviyo and I could cut costs down by 80% switching over to this based off of the volume of emails that we're sending a month and what the price would be. Right. And we have a pretty decent size and we send a lot of emails. And so
I know, I get that.
We're on the upper end of the echelon here. I wonder how many other brands, big and small, could be saving a lot of money. I mean, 80% decrease in cost is not insignificant. So this is an interesting play by Shopify. I'm interested to learn more and see how it goes. And like you said, hear from other people that are willing to, or are going to be testing this soon. But I do think that it kind of makes sense. You know, I'm in a mindset and period of sort of consolidation. And if I could do everything under one roof, it's more simple and more integrated, more seamless, it feels like, which was the value prop that I saw Klaviyo had for me. It was very integrated and sort of plug and play. But if Shopify is doing this and that's where I'm selling my product and hosting the site through, why not? So that is an interesting one.
Wow. All right. Well, was not expecting the pod to become a vendor switch, but here we are.
Well, we just like to keep our options open here. Yeah.
Totally. Speaking of which, GA is switching on us in supposedly 3 days. You know, Google is only good at one thing, which is delaying deadlines. But so we'll see as to whether or not this happens. I put out this tweet either yesterday or 2 days ago. I was just like, I hear so many people complaining about GA4, but nobody is actually saying anything about why Google is making this switch. And they're making it because as privacy sort of expectations continue to tighten, you actually need to have different systems in place in order to show any sort of measurement. And so actually GA4 is like progression towards expected like lack of signal. And so it has different capabilities fundamentally because of that. And so I mean this in like the nicest possible way, but for those of you who are complaining, it's like, you got to lean in because this is like the best it's going to be. If this is like hard, it's only going to get harder.
Oh yeah. We talked about that in the last episode too, with the sort of the vector that Apple is heading into. It's like, what's next? SMS and every touch point of the consumer, if it's on iPhone's property, Apple's property, it's just go ahead and write it off as potentially non-tracking, non-attributable in the future.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. And so it's an ads business. Apple is not, well, Apple's building an ads business, but it's not fundamentally an ads business. So like Google's actually trying to help you. How has your experience been with the switch? And like, I guess like, if you were like, man, here's like the 2 or 3 things that like, I wish somebody had told me, like, what would you say those were?
Yeah, I think the advice that you gave, dive in. I really think that you just have to rip the Band-Aid off. And if I had gotten that advice and I would have just familiarized myself with it sooner and given myself more time, I think it would be a lot easier. The experience so far, it's like diving into the pool that's ice cold. You just got to get in and then eventually you get used to it. When you find yourself in a situation where you are trying to find an answer quickly, right? And you're like, okay, I'm navigating, I'm trying to find the answer. What happened to the bounce rate? What happened to this landing page? What's going on with this audience? Or breaking it down by device and OS. You know, if you don't know how to navigate those things in GA4, that's where those moments of frustration will rise. But if you just set aside time where it's a lull period where you're not under heavy stress or pressure to like go find an answer because something broke, and you can just experiment and learn and take the time with patience to really get comfortable with the navigation and all the little tidbits of like certain parameters and settings that change and different names that change as well. I think establishing that level of comfort in navigating the tool, you do find yourself that it is actually not bad. To your point, there are limitations, right? It is very privacy focused. I remember there were some like demographics type of stuff that I used to really, I lean into with universal analytics that I'm having a hard time accessing in GA4 now. But it's because it is Google's version of aggregate events manager, right? Everybody complained when you had to prioritize 8 events. And what do you mean there was 48 to 72 hours in delayed attribution on Facebook. It's the same thing with Google. It is a future privacy oriented or privacy focused sort of stack. And the more time I spend in the tool, the easier and the more comfortable I've become. It's the default now. I think setting the time to really set it up, right, for your business, and you're like creating your segments and creating all the breakdowns that you like need in like a moment's notice, do that early so that when you do need them, you're not trying to like figure it out as you go along and as there's an emergency. And I think that's the second piece of advice, is like take the time to set it up. Once you set up your tables and your free forms and your visualization and you understand how to navigate it, it actually becomes pretty user friendly. One of the things that I have come to enjoy is the amount of customization on the reports that can be made. I used to have to download everything or export everything out of Universal Analytics, and then I would go copy and paste it into Excel, and I would visualize my own data. With GA4, I'm able to do it all in the platform and actually like on the whim, be like, oh, what does this segment look like? And I can just drag and drop my segments, right? I am occasionally, actually frequently like, this segment isn't here, what the heck? And then I gotta go and make it and define it. And that takes up time. And that's where like those moments of like, like this thing is so like, that's where those moments happen. Yeah. But if you just go in and set it up beforehand and you can save and configure those, and it's kind of like, oh, it's there. Here you go. Drag and drop. We're good to go. It reminds me a lot of Adobe Analytics or Omniture, right? If you've ever experienced Omniture, it feels like navigating Omniture in terms of the breakdowns and segments and how Omniture is set up in terms of the freeform and the tables. And maybe that's why I'm not like as, distraught by it. It's kind of like, oh, like, okay, I see the similarities. This is kind of like Omniture. And then I'm able to like tie back to that experience, which I think my take is just spend time, get comfortable with the platform. And the more time I spend on it, and the more similarities I see to other tools, and it's not as bad as I thought.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And every now and again, you're just like, man, thank God I came from like hardcore ad tech. You know what I mean?
Seriously.
Like, and I think that that's becoming like more and more important as sort of like the ecosystem is evolving, because what's happening is like, not only is like a bunch of signal things going away, and so like a lot of our measurement tools are changing, but as these like rules are getting put in place, like we're starting to actually also see a bunch of like new vendors come into the ecosystem who are like, sort of like, while the signal still like technically exists, and there's like some amount of gray in the policy, you're starting to see vendors crop up to say like, oh, we can help you like refill that gap that has been created by this change, right? And yeah, we won't name any of these vendors, but there's a bunch of vendors that are starting to come up saying like, oh, this data is no longer available. We'll make it available again, right? And it's like somewhere between light gray and dark gray in terms of where it's operating for now. And the thing that I worry about is like, what is the longevity here, right? I mean, this is just my point of view, and other people could disagree. I have actually no problem with people using it while it exists. Like, my view on these things is like, if it exists, like businesses have to run. Like, it's not obvious to me that as a society, we actually chose to have all of these changes happen, right? It's being made largely by a private company. And so like, I'm kind of mixed on that in the first place. So, my general view here is like, yeah, use it for now, but I worry that it's like not obvious how a merchant should interact with like sort of some of these vendors that are cropping up. And like, my gut is like, lean into the assumption that these vendors are going to disappear in 18 months, plan accordingly.
Yeah, I think there hasn't been a precedent set on these sort of things. Like when CCPA rolled out, I remember all the Fortune 500s that we worked on, they were like, what is the guidance? What's the counsel? What do we do? What happens if we don't oblige? And there just hasn't been a precedent. Still to this date, there really hasn't been a precedent set where we can say, oh, if you break this or if you do this, these are the consequences. I think the closest we've gotten most recently is SafeOpt. SafeOpt is a company, right, that got sued or is in a lawsuit because they were taking website visitors, turning those website visitors and IP addresses into personal identifiable information. And then without the user even providing an email, they essentially created or tapped into an identity graph to email people just by visiting the website, right? And consumers were concerned. They're like, wait, I never gave this company my email address. Why are they emailing? Why is this brand able to email me? This is so sketchy and a bit weird. And that raised some alarm bells, and they're in the middle of a lawsuit. And I think that's going to set precedent to these companies that have identity graphs where they're able to turn website visitation into something that is retargetable to communicate. There are
I've gotten those emails for what it's worth.
You've gotten those, yeah.
Because when we talk to merchants in a vendor situation, I'll often go to their website. I haven't done anything. I literally just go to the website and all of a sudden I'm getting their marketing emails, and I'm put in this position where I know my advice, if I were their friend, would just be yo, it's fine that you're doing it now. I would just be careful. Yeah.
I think there are certain laws like can spam, for example, that it's not archaic, but it was established during different periods of the internet age. And, I think there's precedents that have been set where it's, again, gray. And this is where it's going to take more legal decisions and counsel to then set the precedents. Because it's okay, well, what's the difference between getting an email? What about if you get a retargeting ad on Facebook? Do you feel like your privacy was invaded there? And how is that any different from, Conversions API and sort of what one of these vendors is doing is they're just taking that website visitation and, okay, no, we're not emailing. We're just passing it back into Facebook as an audience for you to retarget. It's kind of okay, well, if it's your first party data and you're kind of telling Facebook, hey, I'm giving you this data with permission for your system to retarget, who takes the liability there? It's surely not Facebook, because they're just following instruction. Oh, you're saying that we're okay to retarget this customer? Is it the brand? Is it the vendor? Right? Because what happens if that customer is a CCPA opt-out, or they opted out to no tracking, right? How do you derive and say that user saw this ad because they were explicitly provided as an email list, or did they just see this ad by accident because the algorithm decided that is a person that is deemed to see that ad on that given day, right? One is accidental and it just happens by chance. The other one is a bit more intentional because you're providing that user information into the platform to then go explicitly retarget. So it's how do you even legally process that to where do you put ownership of and responsibility on who is at fault for doing that?
Did I ever tell you I actually built the privacy business at LiveRam? So first of all, there's no way to do this, but fundamentally what actually happens in reality. So those cookie banners or whatever. So we built one that became the fourth most used in the US, right? And I'll tell you where this actually leads is just everybody is pointing the finger at the next person in the chain. That's actually where this leads. So Facebook, literally you can send them whatever data you want, but you're attesting that it is following your rules and following CCPA and all these sorts of things, right? So Facebook is going to point the finger at the brand. The brand is going to point the finger at the vendor. The vendor is going to point the finger, and it's just going to be one big loop. But I think the way this happens in reality, it's just, you just have to look at Europe. Companies will get made examples of. So just unfortunate, for better or for worse, the way that this will actually play out is it will be irrelevant. It'll be irrelevant where you think you can point and all these sorts of things. The only thing that'll end up mattering is who does the enforcing body think that they can make good examples out of? That's where all the attention is going to go. And the way that decision will get made is based on how popular or unpopular that company is within that community and within the ecosystem in general. And so the louder you are, and it's I understand you need to market in order to get customers, but it's also how you will get targeted for enforcement. By the way, none of this is legal advice, obviously, but this is just what happened in Europe, literally. And so it's it's kind of easy to see how this will play out in the US too.
Yeah. So don't get too big. Get big enough to fly under the radar. Got it. No, I'm just kidding. I think you're spot on. And it's not just the brand side, it's also the publisher. I mean, Meta does not have a lot of favor from the public eye to from like a congressional or government sort of body, unfortunately, Meta is going to be potentially the scapegoat to many. And I don't think that's necessarily fair, because when you upload an audience, a custom audience on Meta, you are agreeing that the audience that you are uploading is fully compliant to the terms of service of the platform, as well as any privacy, regulation and tools. And they provide the tools to have limited data control, or LDO. I forgot the name of the actual acronym, but anyone in California, they are able to limit the stream of data that pours in from California. They're doing this for other states as well through the Facebook pixel. I think it'll be interesting. And to your point, it's probably going to be, it has to be a big enough sort of situation that is then going to, again, the company that is the biggest and becomes the example is the one that will set that precedent. And then from there, we know, okay, this is what happens when you cross that line. But right now, it is very much a Wild West right now.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, this was a good episode. I'm excited about this. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.